Congress is preparing to dive deeper into the controversial release of those 5 high-ranking Taliban commanders. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is set to testify before the House Armed Services Committee on Wednesday. California Congressman Buck McKeon chairs that committee, and he issued a statement saying, in part, quote, "We have a responsibility to both the American people and the troops still in harm's way in Afghanistan to get to the bottom of this deal with the Taliban." End quote. Let's bring in the political insiders now. Joining us live from Charleston, South Carolina via satellite, but always good to see him, Pat Caddell, a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter and Fox News contributor. John LeBoutillier on set with me tonight, former Republican congressman for New York. Also on set with me, Doug Schoen, former pollster for President Bill Clinton and a Fox News contributor as well. Gentlemen, let's start by dissecting what we now know to be the case with the situation with Bo Bergdahl. Is the axis moving on this story? Are people more accepting of the actual trade, or what is coming down the pike for the White House?
I'm seeing more and more questions being asked. For example, was there money paid to the Haqqani network as part of the deal, sort of an undisclosed payment? We need to get answers to that question. How much restriction is there, in fact, on the 5 released former detainees in Qatar? We need to get an answer to that. And with John Kerry having said today, I think somewhat, frankly, strangely, Harris, that we have drones and we can potentially, he didn't say drones, but we have the means to kill people who get back to Afghanistan. We need to find out what he was talking about and what he meant.
Wow. Yeah, the reason I ask you about the axis changing on the story, though, is because we have heard from some lawmakers and others and critics who are saying, well, what would the choices have been? Even our own Fox News contributor, Charles Krauthammer, said the White House bungled this, and I'm paraphrasing, but he might have made the same decision.
Well,
John?
Maybe, but I think as time goes on, what we're learning is you can't believe anything anybody in this administration says about it. For instance, Secretary Hagel, from the get-go, has denied what has been published, which is that 5 or 6 U.S. servicemen died in 2009 searching for Bergdahl.
He said he doesn't have any knowledge, which gives him some degree of wiggle room.
But he's the Secretary of Defense. How is it that the newspapers all know?
Let's
they know the
watch
names.
That together.
Okay.
Let's put that up.
Okay.
On Sergeant Bergdahl, I do not know of specific circumstances or details of U.S. soldiers dying as a result of efforts to find and rescue Sergeant Bergdahl. I am not aware of those specific details or any facts regarding that issue.
We've seen the parents of dead soldiers who died searching for Bergdahl on the TV shows this past week, complaining about this thing. So why are they out here talking about it? And he says he didn't know.
Pat?
Well, let me say first of all that I think that the numbers are changing to their detriment. You know, on Sunday and Monday, the polling Fox did and Rasmussen had it a split but negative proposition. I guarantee you by the end of the week, those numbers had moved significantly, because they were originally, those questions were taken at the time of when the president was celebrating and everyone was holding back. Look, I raised an issue last week. It's not just the people who were killed. We have these 5 Taliban top commanders, one of whom the Wall Street Journal highlighted about a village he genocide in Afghanistan. They are living in luxury. There was a report on ABC this morning about the luxurious accommodations they have. I want to know how many Americans died to capture those Taliban. This deal, the proposal for a deal, which in 2011 and 12, Secretary Clinton, Secretary Panetta denounced, would not do, was a much bigger deal, and they didn't believe the Taliban. They refused to make this trade. The Senate knew and refused. Everyone refused. It is clear that this was a White House operation. And let me tell you what I think. I hate to say this, but I guess they wanted you could be cynical enough to think they wanted the BA off the front page. They got something much worse.
Wow, that's a strong statement. Doug, is it greater criticism over how the deal was rolled out to the American public or the deal itself?
Well, the deal itself, as John and Pat have ably suggested, is very, very problematic. More and more questions being asked. Why? How many people were put in harm's way or killed as a result of trying to search for Bergdahl and ultimately by these terrorists? And ultimately, what's going to happen now? All of those questions are happening. But as John suggested, I think the credibility of this administration in terms of its overall foreign policy, what they say and what they do are completely at variance. And we saw this week an absence of coherence between the U.S. and the Europeans. Ultimately, this is a president losing credibility and losing stature.
Are there more prisoner releases coming down the pike? Hold on one second, because we're hearing that, John. We're hearing that there are more.
Well, are there more prisoners? I mean, there's a Canadian couple that are being held by the Taliban. Supposedly, we've seen proof
So
of
what
life
kind of
video.
deals do you think could be made for them? Because, I mean, if the White House is going to release prisoners anyway, maybe you'd make the argument, well, you better get something for it.
Well, there's also the Marine in Mexico, which the administration doesn't seem to want to deal with and get him back. I don't know. I think we got to go back to the politics of this thing. Pat alluded to it, and Doug and Pat and I have talked about it. A week ago when we were with you, what was going on? It was to get the VA scandal for Obama off the front page. They did it with this thing, but they so botched this thing from the get-go. Can you imagine having the father of this prisoner standing in the Rose Garden next to the president while the father is tweeting with the leaders
There's
of...
the video.
Yeah, there they are. And Mr. Bergdahl is trying to get his son back. I don't blame him. But he's tweeting with the Taliban leadership, promising, I'm going to work to get all the other prisoners out of Guantanamo. He's standing with the commander-in-chief whose soldiers are getting killed by the Taliban. How can this be?
And we should balance that, the report that there's no official way to know if that tweet came from his account, but it has been deleted if that were the case. Pat?
Well, yeah, let me just say, let's talk about incompetence for a moment while we saw these pictures of the family there. That moment may go down in history as what they call a Wall Street Minsky moment, or I'd better from Hollywood, they jumped the shark moment for this administration. All of a sudden, everything it does and says is exposed. It goes too far. The president being out there tireless, by the way, and the family, and you would think there was...
Wait a minute. I have to stop you there because John just put his thumb up in the air.
Well,
what does that mean, the president tireless? Tell me, Pat.
No, let me finish. That's just an aside. My point is that when the president, look, when he goes out there and does this, they have a whole office of people. They have been dealing with the Bergdahls for months, for years, actually. No one said to the president, I don't think, to be kind about it, they come off as a little eccentric. Mr. President, maybe we shouldn't have this going on. Maybe there are going to be some problems. I know from my experience, you would try to do that. It is the incompetence here and what I said before, this team of clowns that took over from a team of very qualified people in foreign policy. Basically, they hatched this deal. And we'll get to the thing with Rice and about the not notifying Congress. But this moment, as John has said, look, the Fox poll has 80% of the American people
Right,
blame
let's pop that
all
up
the
on the screen for
politicians
everybody.
lied.
So we can tell them what these numbers are. This Fox poll takes a look at how people think that terrorists will lead to more U.S. soldier hostages and problems for our men and women abroad. Very likely that would happen. Somewhat likely. Let's add those numbers up because that's a yes to this, and that's 84% of the people, John.
Yeah, the point I was going to make is the president, right after this Bergdahl thing happened, when he was asked either that afternoon or the next day about, did you notify Congress? He said, yes, Congress was notified. Well, they weren't. That's a lie by the president of the United States, or he told someone to notify him and they didn't do it. And then they keep changing why they didn't notify.
And they keep changing accounts of what Mr. Bergdahl's health was.
Right.
And was he at risk? There's so many unanswered questions. We need
even Senator Feinstein out of California said he didn't look malnourished.
Right. And we need a Benghazi-style select committee investigation of this whole release.
Now, how often are we going to ask for a select committee? Wait,
as long as
I
it
do want
takes.
to get this in there because I believe you brought this up. Secretary Kerry said that it's baloney that it makes it more risky for our people abroad.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
The guy that wiped that village out that Pat mentioned, they've gone to that village, the Journal did in the last week, and the people who've returned to it are now deathly afraid this bastard's coming back to do it again. And we're letting that guy out? It's unheard of.
Excuse me.
I want to go back to something, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but you guys mentioned it, and I think it had a meaning. Why does it matter what the president dresses like, Pat?
Oh, I don't really care, and I don't want to waste enough time. I just think the president ought to show, he's going to do something. This is a big deal. You're in the Jimmy Carter. I mean, you really should wear your ties if you're president.
And people
These
on
not
Twitter
all
are
informal.
commenting. I mean, they're saying
Well,
presidential.
Get on the
presidential.
serious business.
They're
I
right.
didn't mean to start
They're
that.
right.
Let's deal with the serious stuff. Let me go back to something. What John Kerry is talking about. These guys are major players. They will come back. They know our tactics. They are heroes. They're being treated like heroes. When we did not agree to the deal before, the Congress was informed, nothing leaked. We have a problem here with a president who believes, we don't, pardon my expression, if you want a better one, I don't need no stinking law. I do whatever I want. And if Jonathan Turley, I do not understand why Jonathan Turley, a liberal Democrat who seems to be the only American I know willing to stand up and say what he wrote this week, and he's an Obama supporter, that the president is doing what Richard Nixon only dreamed he could do. And he's getting away with it because of the Congress and the courts.
Wild, it says on my Twitter page, Bergdahl will stay in Germany for months until the White House can say it's old news. And John, you said, well, it won't take that long. What's going on?
Well, look, the White House probably itself has similar questions to the ones we've been raising tonight. They don't know the answers, but the one thing they don't want, politically or substantively, is Bergdahl holding a press conference under these circumstances. They want to keep him under wraps. They want to debrief him fully, and most of all, they want this off the front pages in the way that the IRS scandal got off the front pages, Benghazi.
The VA.
Well,
VA?
and in fact, Pat, during the commercial, you said you look at Benghazi to kind of inform you about what Doug is saying. Why?
Well, because basically, to quote Marx, and I've had this in reference to Susan Rice, history repeats itself first as tragedy, then farce. What we had before was we had the people we still have never heard, remember, from the people who were in the complex, who were fighting there that day, have been suppressed by the CIA, the FBI, and this administration from being talked to by reporters or testifying. And you know what? You think they want this guy out there until they can try to program him? Look, I don't know that he is. I think some people have gone off the end. Whether he was, I'm sure it was an unpleasant, he was tortured. I don't believe probably some people think this is Homeland and he's really Brody, that this is life imitating art.
Oh my
But
goodness.
I think the fact of the matter is, we know that something went wrong, and they know that they have lied. Let's use the proper word. They have dissembled all the way through this. The president on down, and Susan Rice, most of all, when I said about tragedy and farce, who writes her talking points? This woman
Pat,
should never have been in that job, but thanks to John McCain and Lindsey Graham, they approved her.
Well, at least she shouldn't be reading any more talking points out loud at this point on a Sunday show because it's got to be painful to have it keep coming back.
Well, the first time, though, she was the UN ambassador, and they asked her to go on the Sunday shows on Benghazi. They give her talking points, right? Now she's the National Security Advisor. The National Security Advisor writes the talking points. They coordinate everything. They're the boss, other than the president. So the fact that she goes on, and can you imagine saying on TV, oh, Bo Bergdahl has served this country with honor and distinction. And now at Normandy, she backed it up again.
Okay, I want to, before we get to break here, and we'll come back to, but you know the Clintons, you know Hillary Clinton, you've worked with her.
Sure.
Does this stick to her?
Here's what I think her position is, that she was negotiating for a bigger deal with the Taliban.
Back when she was Secretary of State, she was negotiating.
Bigger deal with the Taliban for peace talks and much tighter restrictions in Qatar on the travel. She is now taking the position that the idea of bringing home a soldier who's caught in Afghanistan is an honorable thing. She's yet to speak to the substance. It's not in her book, but she clearly has a different position from the one the president not only has, but acted upon. She can't distance herself from President Obama and hope to have a seamless path to the nomination. On the other hand, her position as a much more hawkish figure who had real doubts about the deal and a much more expansive plan, she's got, as I said, hard choices.
She mentions it, but this hadn't happened yet.
Lo and behold, what happens this week? We get a leak from the book about, and she said it in a speech, I now realize my vote to authorize the use of force in Iraq was a mistake. So she's worried about the left. She's worried that someone else could come, like Obama did, on Iraq and other things.
With the war, right.
So, yeah, she's hawkish. Her instinct is hawkish. But this time, she's going to outdo the left and make sure they can't get her.
Do you get credit for your instincts if your actions are different? I don't know. It's just a question that we can't answer right now because we're running out of time, and I want to get to Pat on Iran. Pat, you were with the White House team as our hostages had been taken in Iran. Talk to me a little bit about that situation and this, just comparatively.
Well, look, when the hostages were taken, it was in response to the fact that we had let, on humanitarian grounds, the Shah into the United States for medical treatment, which we were told could only be done in the United States. And that was the pretext for seizing the hostages, and they demanded we return the Shah. The president said absolutely not. The United States won't do that. And we eventually, got him in Panama, but they held the hostages and kept up in the ante. We would never negotiate with them on that or make a deal. You know what? And we said we want everyone back. We all agreed we want everyone back.
Right.
Every soldier, every diplomat. But I worry what these people would have done, whether they would have given the Shah back, John Kerry particularly.
Wow. Pat, John, Doug, always a rich discussion. Catch them on foxnews.com, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, and noon Eastern, 9 a.m. West, outnumbered right here.